how we do it, investors and entrepreneurs together.
Right, the few people that decided to come this morning, thank you. We have a group of fantastic ladies, so why don't we do some introductions, and we'll start with Julie and go down.
How much time do I have?
All the time in the world.
Oh, amazing. So I'm Julie. I'm a PhD by training, scientist, but I turned VC for roughly a decade, and now an entrepreneur, and I'm CEO of several things, but notably today BrainTel, which is a company that measures the brain to improve the development of new therapies in brain care.
Hi, I'm Mary McGovern, a MedTech startup from the UK. So we have a cold plasma product which is very high tech and quite interesting. So my background is we're from an industry spin out. So I worked in the semiconductor industry for a long time in developing new business, and then moved to the medical tech sector.
Hello everyone, I'm Sanchita. I'm a pharmacist by training. I spent half of my career on the operations side in Abbott, on the cardiovascular portfolio, doing product management for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. Then switched my career to VC, was doing early stage investments to this summer, and recently joined EQT and doing growth stage, late stage investments in MedTech, digital health, and diagnostics.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Swarna Balasubramaniam, and I was a colon and rectal surgeon in active practice for 20 years. And along the way, I saw an unmet clinical need and a solution for it, developed a product, stopped practice 5 years ago, and now am running a MedTech, early stage MedTech firm. So I'll tell you more later.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Margaret Calmetta. I founded Rapid Nexus Nanotech Wound Solutions for a very simple reason. I met an individual who lost all of his limbs to amputations. There was not a solution for him, and he suffered from diabetes. A week later, he passed away. At that time, I had my own technology that was 500% faster in the oral surgery field. I quickly made a decision to transfer my technology into the advanced wound space, and we're happy to introduce the world's first peri-wound healing solution, which is the surrounding tissue healing solution for diabetic individuals.
Good morning, my name is Sabine Boys. My background is I'm a finance person, but for the last 10 years, I was the CFO and then the CEO of a company called Occlutech, which is the number 2 in provider of occluders in the minimal invasive cardiac space in Europe and number 3 in the world. And the last 4 years when I was the CEO, we were able to double the revenue, which is now up to almost 50 million. And we went quite a high pace of growth with over 20% of growth, which is it's a very unique platform in Europe. There are unfortunately not so many MedTech companies anymore running in Europe that have that platform. We brought a product into the US and had its second trial running actually on time. And it was a great journey, and I decided to embark on a new journey just very recently, and I'm looking forward to this panel.
Hi everybody, my name is So-Young Park. I'm the general partner of 1004 Venture Partners. We are early stage global fund to invest in transformative technology to support healthy aging.
And I'm Ragasha, the least useful person on this panel. These ladies operate, and I show up later after they do all the hard work. All right, let's get into the questions. So we've got, the way we're gonna organize this, we've got about 5 categories, and we're gonna start with investor perspectives and growth strategies. And Sanchita, Sabine, and So-Young are gonna speak about their experiences. So Sanchita, in your role at EQT Life Sciences, what key qualities do you look for in early stage MedTech startups that indicate potential for success?
So we do growth stage. Not, I think So Young is early stage. Instead of maybe, where do you want to start? Growth or late? I can start with growth.
However you want to.
Yeah. So on growth, that's, I guess, all of these companies I hope get to that stage. By commercial, we mean different things in different categories. Of course, MedTech is very different than digital. I'll start with the MedTech space. One fundamental thing for our fund specifically is the health economics of a company. So as the name suggests of the fund, health economics, what we mean by that is it has to improve clinical outcomes, which I think a lot of companies focus on very early on because clinical validation is the first step to adoption. But in our opinion, a good health economic case or a business case for the people who are going to adopt the technology from a provider perspective and a payer perspective is essential for commercial adoption. So what we mean by that is it's not just a revenue traction. We don't need to show just like, X amount of millions in revenues or potential forecasts, but what is the business case for these providers? So for example, if a technology is shown to, let's say, reduce cost of care, but in terms of fewer hospitalization rates, fewer reintervention rates, in that case, we have a clear business case for a provider to want to adopt this technology, even if there's an upfront cost. So that's one way we look at commercial. So it's not just that the fact that you're in the market, but also you are going to be adopted. From a market need perspective, there's ways that we look at it differently based on the technology you have that would give us an idea of the commercial potential. Because we don't come in with, we're not private equity where you're like, a profitable company and, X million revenues. We're still early commercial, so it's entering the market or just entered the market or about to enter the market, but we need to have clarity on the commercial adoption. So on the market need, what I mean by that is, we have discussions with KOLs and with physicians on the ground and try to understand if there's a need from their perspective. So I think this is very common in many investors, today. It's not just the technology is, better, really helping patients. Unfortunately, it's about the physician that's going to adopt the technology and use it. So there's a lot of usability diligence that we do on the physician level. And if it's, let's say, we look at the clinical results and the clinical trials that have been done, the pace of, let's say, recruitment within a study, if there's been any hiccups there, I'm not saying it's always a guarantee, but it gives us an idea of if it's going to be adopted or not, if there's actually patients for that technology. On digital health, of course, it's a bit different. We had a lot of discussions yesterday in the Investors Forum on this, but I think we're all trying to figure it out, I guess, at the same time. But there we'd say we go a bit later stage, more established revenues, not just early revenues. We shy away from, consumer-focused devices only. So any enabling technologies, I'd say it's, the future of medical devices also will be medical technologies and not just, pure hardware. So it's still a process for us to define what that means, but it's way later, I'd say.
I think it would be helpful if you could talk about, what the revenue threshold is for some of these companies, because, in MedTech, you have to go through this cliff where you have to sort of understand limited market release and then go to full commercialization. So, there are different inflection points. So that would be helpful, I think, for...
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And unfortunately, I'm not sure there's one answer that fits all medical devices. I'd say, let's stagger it this way. If you want to see, like, let's say the first year of 1 million revenues, what is the quality of that revenues? That's what we look at mostly. Where is this coming from? Is it just one use, like 25 users across different countries that used it once? Or is it being used regularly in their routine practice? That's maybe, a good way for us to see the quality of the revenues. On digital health, it's at least 3 to 5 million in revenues. So not just the fairly, and recurring revenues. So the business model in that case is also something we look at beyond the quality of revenues.
Great, thank you. Sabine, the woman who doesn't talk about how she built Occlutech very often, but as someone who led growth of an early stage company, dare I say a very difficult one in a difficult market, to FDA approval and recently in the United States as well. How did you demonstrate these qualities to investors?
Yeah, so I think the number one thing to keep in mind is that in the end it comes down to one thing, and that is to deliver upon what you tell people what you're going to do. And I think there's also a lot of honesty and being candid about things in this, right? Because as we all know, it takes longer and it costs more. And I think the better you explain that to people and the more open you are with the journey and what obstacles can be in the way and how you're going to approach them, the easier it is to build that relationship than to go also through times which may be more difficult or where you then face that obstacle. And when I joined Occlutech in 2014 as the CFO, it was obviously a completely different company than it is today. We were 80 people, and we had a single mid-digit revenue. But I think in the end, it's about the product, right? Like you said, it's can you build this product, and is it a recurrent revenue? Does it have the features to become a global standard-setting product, and I think that's what the company inherently had, and that's what we built upon, and then built upon the shareholders and the investors, and it's a lot of stakeholder management. I think every CEO here knows how much stakeholder management running a company actually means, and it's the shareholders, it's the employees to take on with you on the journey, to set a vision, to break it down into short, mid, long-term goals, to align that with, of course, the board, to bring the investors on board, to have the analysts and banks understanding your business model. So there is a lot of parts that need to come together to then go through that journey. But in the end, you just got to deliver. And I think that's really the important part of building the trust going forward and building something sustainable that will take the company to the next level. And I think that's what we've done quite successfully at Occlutech, where we have built the company, and it's now a very global player, active in 85 markets, entered the US, as you mentioned, with the first PMA FDA approval end of last year, now coming the second product, and building that trust and being candid and open about all the obstacles that might come your way, but having a good plan of how to take all the stakeholders along. I think this is what I would say is the bottom line of building a solid company.
I think it would also be helpful because, in Europe, it's so difficult to commercialize some of these technologies because you don't have enough volumes. So, it would be helpful if you could speak to how you ended up building this double-digit revenue growth trajectory there.
Yeah, so, Europe is a wonderful place for once, but it has some difficulties, and it has become more increasingly difficult. From a regulatory perspective, which then also comes in with a clinical perspective, which is the most expensive part, obviously, in a company journey. But also the investor part has become more difficult because, unfortunately, and we saw that in the first presentation today, the money is not in Europe, and it's not spent in Europe. EQT, luckily, is a good example of having some funds in Europe. But I used to say everything is just a digit more in the US. You just get a digit more for everything you do. And also then in the exit, which is a bit unfortunate, but that's what it is. That said, I think Europe also has the opportunity to build something very unique because we have a great space. We actually have the same population in EU5 than the US has. So it's not that. Of course, reimbursement and less, but then you need to go global too, and you have to build that. And I think that's been one of the key strengths. And frankly, this also was a great achievement of the CEO. When I came in as the CFO and building that distribution network, being present in all markets, and we were market leaders in a number of countries, including Japan, which is one of the highest standard quality countries, and to have that and to build this and to be able to show this high quality and performance, I think helps then taking this forward, and this is how we've built it.
Well, that's great, and I know you're going to do it again, so congratulations on a very successful decade there. So Young, given your focus on US-based investments, how do you see these qualities play out in the American MedTech landscape, and how do these possibly compare to the rest of the world?
I actually see that the quality, if you want to be successful globally, I see you should be successful locally. So in local, how much you can actually gain your foundations and traction, and then you can actually be ready to go to outer world from your comfort zone. So I guess US is slightly different market, but still what you built so far will be such a great asset, and then it definitely will be helpful to go to US market. But US market, as you know, the payment system is slightly different. Of course, we have a government-led aspects, but also a lot of decision-making comes from the physicians, payers. Now we have more voices from patients. So that kind of complexity, I want you to be aware when you go to US market.
Great, thank you. So the next portion of this, we're going to talk about founder journey and securing investments, and Swarna, Margaret, and Mary are going to speak a little bit about their companies and how they've done that. So Swarna, you've transitioned from a practicing surgeon to an entrepreneur in medical devices. Can you share how you approached communicating the clinical value of your company and solution to investors, particularly in a space as specific as ileus recovery? And then do you feel it was easier to gain investors' confidence given your background?
Thank you for this question. I really would first off say that I am a little bit of an accidental entrepreneur. What happened was that when I was in practice, I saw a huge unmet clinical need that affected not only patients, this problem of intestinal paralysis that occurs after anyone has abdominal surgery, but also affects surgeons and hospitals. So surgeons, have more work when patients have complications and longer hospital stays, and hospitals in the US bear the economic burden of the cost. And I saw a solution in another device, and I started asking the question, how can we bring this to all of our patients instead of just the specific number of patients that it was a wound care device. And so, I think being the end user and a clinician who has the vision from the end, beginning from the end to develop something, does have certain value with investors. I think they have more confidence that this is going to be, usable and acceptable in the marketplace. I think it comes with some downsides too. I'm not your typical product-based entrepreneur with an engineering background or a business background, and I've had to learn all of those things. And I think that's where there's some doubt. Can you really do this? So they want to keep seeing that you can produce. And I think, I think every founder has strengths and weaknesses. And, I come from the other side. So I think my strengths will come through when we go into the clinical stage and the commercial stage. And, something Sanchita said earlier was that, the health economics really matter. Well, I'm so aware of this, having, practiced for many years and sat on so many hospital committees, that we already have a health economics model built out. So then when we get the clinical data, we'll be plopping that right in there and be ready to show someone. So I think, there's just different strengths you come with as an entrepreneur, and, it's always a challenge and always a pleasure.
Well, isn't it interesting, because if you asked a male physician, the answer would be very different. They'd say, it wasn't hard for me at all.
Probably true.
All right, thank you, Swarna. Margaret, have you ever faced the challenge of communicating the significance of your wound healing technology? What strategies did you use to help investors understand the potential impact of your innovation?
Absolutely. I've had a challenge of communicating the impact of the technology. Number one, the general public does not understand what chronic wounds really are, that they are non-healing and they can cause sepsis, amputations, or death. Most investors are from a general public arena, not PhDs or MDs, or I should say not PhDs. And so therefore, I have to start out by using visual language and get very, very simple and get in a little bit of the understanding of the problem that this can actually cause sepsis and death right in 3 sentences. So that's a challenge.
And then can you speak a little bit about, the potential of the impact of your innovation on a larger scale?
Absolutely. So the impact is that today alone, every 20 seconds, someone is receiving an amputation around the globe just because they have diabetes. In the US, the numbers are pretty staggering, as in other countries. 1,380 amputations will be performed today and every day. And the reason for that is because wound care industry focuses on the hole in the leg, the wound. The hole in the leg with the diabetic population is not actually the problem. The problem is they have neuropathy, they have a breakdown of their tissues in the peripheral limb, and that's why the wound opens, and that's why it doesn't heal, and that's why it's a repetitive process. These patients undergo years and years of therapy and live with an open wound. We had a patient that had an open wound for 40 years. She was burned when she was 17 years old and came to us decades later, and we closed that wound for her.
I mean, that's great. I've spent so many years in the peripheral vascular space, and I can tell you this is a complete disaster in the United States right now. But thank you for that. Mary, with AdTech Healthcare's focus on cold plasma technology, you've been at the forefront of disruptive innovation within a very specific niche of biotech, which is not very easily understood. So can you please speak to about how have you managed to maintain investor confidence with that and momentum over a long development cycle?
Yes, cold plasma is an energized gas like the aurora. It's really cool looking. It's quite Star Trek-y, very colorful. And what it does is it physically breaks a hole in the bacterial cell wall and disrupts them, kills the bacteria. So because we're an industry spin-out, plasma is made in the semiconductor industry. So explaining the technology to my key stakeholders wasn't that hard because it was plasma. But what has been really difficult is, because with my first MedTech, so explaining how the journey, so first of all, there's no predicate, there's no insurance code, it is really disruptive innovation. Usually you treat bacteria with antibiotics, you don't zap them. So that's been the hardest with my industrial partner to say, okay, first of all, we got approval, then, oh, there's no insurance code, what are we going to do? So all of this takes a lot of time. So now I have been fundraising with investors for the last year, and the technology, yeah, that's not the hardest part. It is the fact of how is this going to be adopted? And that's really, I didn't know all the journey, and that's as a first-time MedTech startup.
What has been your biggest challenge in terms of raising capital, and what are some successes that you can share with other founders?
Yeah, we're not quite there yet. We're on our journey. Probably the biggest challenge is explaining the technology takes a bit of effort. You can use cool videos and it's quite interesting. So the clinical evidence has been key and I focused on that. So we have 80 peer-reviewed publications because we show it works, and I'm passionate about AMR. Antimicrobial resistance is a big problem. The superbugs, they need to be killed. Infection is the second leading cause of death for cancer patients. It shouldn't be. The infection should be managed. Chemotherapy is what is required. So that has been, the challenge is getting the clinical evidence and getting the message and creating the awareness about AMR and the superbugs, because I don't think it's quite in everybody's mind yet. even though COVID should have taught us lessons when there was no vaccine. Like, we were worried.
Yeah, I'm actually really curious. What are some of the questions you guys get very often at the various stages in your company life cycle? Because, on my end, I'm constantly getting questions like, let me see more data, let me see an RCT, let me see another 50,000, patients, and perhaps we'll do this. But, at some point, data, enough is enough, right? And in the United States, we've made a hodgepodge out of this because a tiny statistical significance is suddenly now worth $1 billion. And there's a limit, right? So what are some of those questions that you keep getting about seeing more data in these new spaces?
I don't really get to see more data for clinical, but what is always asked is, how are you going to do this business model? Because it is disruptive innovation, and with no insurance code, they really need to see that. So that's what we work on a lot.
What about some of the other questions? Sabine, your space is so driven by data.
And it really depends on what product and what life cycle, obviously, you talk about. At Occlutech, we have products that are very well established, have been implanted 100,000 of times. We've sold 100,000 of implants. So then you obviously have more different questions. Then it's more about scalability. How do you commercialize? How do you keep track with good growth? And how do you take it further? But we also, of course, had products that are very innovative, that like in heart failure, which is a very hot topic now, device therapy in heart failure. And there's a lot of data, and there's a lot of data being generated, and it's not always very clear on how this data is to be interpreted. And bottom line, I think it really comes down to finding the right investor for this, because of course you can ask for more data, but then it also depends on, and you need to have a base of data, obviously, but in the end it's also about, how do I treat these patients, and what is the commercial model behind this, and is this ever going to fly? And in that regard, I really have to agree with you. If you can't make it in your own home market, maybe think twice about taking it outside. There has to be some success there to really take the basis. But I would say it's a bit of a game to ask for more and more data at one point. So it needs to get out of this and then show the commercial traction and the evidence for the patient.
Data at a certain level, right? I think in MedTech specifically, it's what sales reps use to leverage. And we have gotten beyond the point of extensive data in the United States. I think we have to do something about this, but that's for a different panel. All right, talking about balancing investor expectations and scaling, Julie, the next question is for you when I get my script correct here. Julie is the founder of BrainTel, and with your extensive experience in life sciences, how do you navigate balancing between meeting immediate investor expectations and pursuing long-term innovation in brain care?
As good as possible, number one. Well, trying to at least. And maybe just to also elaborate on what was being discussed just a few minutes ago, I think that part of our job as MedTech CEOs is to find the right balance between the heart and the brain of our investors, already onboarded or soon to be onboarded, because I truly believe that investors are the key stakeholders we need to embark in the journey, and we need to make them part of the story, meaning they will do the deal because they want to, not because it has data, not because it has clinical evidence, but because they just want to be part of the story. So that's number one, I think, is how to make sure that we can attract them in a very positive way, of course, to join the journey, number one. And then we need to give them confidence of the capacity to execute and to deliver altogether. This is a very challenging situation, and plural, of course, and we need to have them on board, understand challenge, support in every way what is going on. And I think that for me, navigating between the cash constraint and the high, sky is the limit perspective, we can, change the world, everything, is also teaming up with our actual investors and have them part of, our ambassadors too, because they are the most attractive, or I would say even compelling assets of the company directly, because when they are convinced, they will convince everyone around. It's just like our investigators, it's just like everyone within the company, but they are part of us, clearly. And so that's just, I think it's how to manage that as kind of, being, finding the right balance between being very transparent, executing, but also sharing passion and having them being part of the story.
And then what would you say your inflection point was at the company when it came to?
Very good. I don't know. I think at some point it's about getting things done. You were referring to data and clinical evidence. That's basic, mandatory. That's the foundation. But how you get the investors say, okay, it's now I want to do it. It's about having the right discussion, I believe, and teaming up with the individual. I mean, it's a very personal level, I believe. It's how do you trust the person that you have in front of you to do the deal. And also by saying, we need to do it now. There is time to market is now. And that's this sense of emergency at some point that we need to work on. It's being transparent, but also very pragmatic at some point. And I'm currently fundraising, discussing with investors. We have cash issues just like everyone else, trying to really be equity-driven and invest every single euro that we have very efficiently. But then at some point, it's about value creation. And if the people you're talking to endorse the project, they will understand. It's, this nucleation point comes, or I think happens, when the people in front of you understand that. So my job is to make sure that they understand that's the right timing to join us.
Yeah,
comment?
absolutely.
Yeah. So I think these are all fantastic points, and I think you brought up earlier, Margisha, that I'm doing something very specific, and I have similar problems even at the early stage. And so I think I find that there's two kinds of investors. We live in a time of very short attention spans, and so a lot of investors do what I call checkbox investing. So they look for external markers, whether you've had a different kind of investor, whether you've gotten a certain kind of grant, whether you have, and this is where the data stuff comes from.
Ticking the box approach.
Exactly.
Let's start doing it on TikTok.
Well, I mean, it comes in many forms, but I think if you find the investor who actually has the time to join your journey and listen to what you have, because when you're in a new market, you're not going to already have an established market. And in my situation, there is demonstration that the basic technology already works because it started as a clinical observation. But a lot of people just do not have the patience or the time to do that kind of diligence with you. And so I think having that extremely large funnel at the top to sort out which investor is the right investor is the right approach. And it's taken me a while to figure that out and to sort it out. But when they start asking for data, I immediately say, okay, thank you very much. I'll come back with data.
And it's also about understanding what they expect from us. We need to understand investors' model and how they are going to make money, because they need to make money at some point. So we need to integrate that into the plan that we're proposing and offering.
That's why I already have a health economics model. But the thing is, they have to want to listen first, right?
I'm going to talk. Okay, I'm going to take the investors' invitation to defend. No, not to defend, but I think one point that I wanted to mention, what you said, and then I'll answer to that. what's the inflection point? And I think sometimes the people and the person itself is the inflection point. So it's going from talking to doing. When you see doers, it comes across. When you have a track record of showing that you've delivered, you've accomplished, and it doesn't have to be in the same thing. So I'm not saying, only serial entrepreneurs or only a certain type of CEO, that it comes across. So then you get confidence if you're going into a disruptive market of, okay, this person can deliver it. Are they surrounding themselves with the right people to deliver it? Because it's not always just about the data. You can have the best data in the world, but if you don't get the right people to communicate that or to position your company, it's not going to be adopted. So I think the question on value inflection, I'm pretty sure like what you discussed was like doing, and a lot of people just talk. So that's when you lose them. On what you just mentioned, I think there is a clear difference, and I take this as an investor as well. Like I notice it around me. There are different types of investors. So it's a marriage. I like to say, it's like when you're dating, you have to assess both parties. It's not just because they have the money. You want them with you on your journey. So I think there's a lot of investors that don't have that background and maybe are just followers, not lead investors. They will ask these questions because it's not their job to lead the round, so it's not their responsibility, so they'll trust someone else to come in. As a lead investor, I think you have to take on that responsibility. You have to go deep. And I think what I'm noticing from the partners now that I'm observing at my firm, and I recently joined, but they have 30 years of experience, is that there's a pros and cons of having the experience. Let's say, it's very easy for some of them to really see what's going to work and what's not going to work because they've been there so long. If you go into a market that's established, cardiovascular, there's no point in convincing me on something because we know the strategics, we know the market, we know the transactions that have happened. So it's easier to understand what's going to work and what's not going to work. In a new market, that maybe doesn't apply, but experience does matter when it comes to not distinguishing who will make it, I think. So, my 2 cents.
And in my situation, the investors approaching have been very interested in the X return, and especially early investors. And so we've had to work our modeling to show them what the X return is going to be. And most recently, we've been doing testing to show what market segment we're displacing, what product we're displacing, how much market share that product has. And then we do a second set of modeling saying, okay, an acquirer can do this because they're already have a global presence, and this is the market share that they'll be displacing with our product. So we have 2 working models to be able to substantiate what we're talking about. So that's been taking a lot of my time is the actual modeling. So I'm wearing a lot of hats, first of all, technology is displacing because there's not a solution out there for the diabetic individuals that are experiencing non-healing wounds. And second of all, then I have to come from the financial point of view. So it's been a very good journey as of late because we've tested a lot on the antimicrobial level, the lowest hanging fruit, and then also the healing level. So we're able to show what market segments we're able to displace.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do believe that people invest in people, and of course it is like a marriage. That said, I think we all kind of suffer a bit from the short attention span syndrome. It's just our world, and I would say 90% of you sitting there have looked at your phone 10 times in a minute, and I would do the same if I would be sitting there. So that's just reality. That's just where we live. So I think the number one thing a CEO needs to be good at and needs to adapt at, and I've seen this fail many, many times, is to see what's the target audience and how can I capture them in less than 20 seconds with something that's important to them, and to read that out. And it is very different. I had people hardly knowing what a heart is and where it is, to being very, very detailed and clinically specific. And that's the hard part about being the CEO. You have to be very on the top, you have to go very far down in all areas, but I think that's just reality. That's what we have to face. We have to be very good in getting that attention in the first 20 seconds and then capturing it from there, and that's just the reality of our world.
You know, I keep saying this all the time, but markets are not, everybody keeps asking about TAMs. TAMs don't just exist. You have to build the market. You have to enable a market, right? These $3 billion, $5 billion TAMs that I keep seeing, those were built, they never existed once upon a time. They were built by people that are on these panels. And so, you know, when we ask for that TAM data, we have to sort of take a step back and say, okay, for example, Field Medical, right, is coming out with VT, with a PFA catheter for ventricular tachycardia. That is a very small market. When I worked at Medtronic, that's like sudden cardiac arrest, 300,000 patients, right? I lost my breath convincing people why you needed to have a technology to expand the market. So at some point, I think, you know, and I'm curious to hear from you and So Young, where do you draw the line, right? Because these TAMs, like I said, weren't there in the past.
No, I'm totally with you. I'm not saying I'm going to skip the market sizing slide, but it tells you how a CEO looks at it. For me, it's the number of patients, as you said. It's not, also because the market side depends on the value of, if there's something already in the market, how did you come up with that number? Or is it like, there's nothing on the market yet, I will develop that market? As you said, right? Like in the past, a lot of markets had to be developed. For me, it's really a bottom-up analysis rather than a top-down analysis I look at. And the way, when I ask a question to a CEO, how did you come up with that market, it tells me if they know their market. Have they been down there, you know, on the field and understand, today, these are the number of patients that are treated with this, it represents this value, these are the players in that market, or is it, these are the patients that need this, there's no one in the market, but we need X amount of years to develop the market. So I think you can go so granular in those questions. And for me, what I'm looking at is not, give me the size, give me the billions. It's really about showing that you're the best in class for that market. I don't need to know that if it's you're the only player and you're going to take the whole market, or you're coming into a competitive space, but you're the best in class. But I mean, I think it's a necessary exercise for every CEO to do, because if you don't, then it's a red flag. But then how you navigate the build-up of that. It's not just the big, I'm with you, I hate the TAMs.
So thanks for that. And you know, we're sort of running out of time, but I'll just ask So Young the question on that. With your extensive background, right? How do you view early stage investing, and then what trends do you see shaping the future of early stage MedTech?
Yeah, we don't have a lot of time, so I'll make it very short. So for early stage, I really appreciate on the panelists here, all your viewpoint is very valid, and I really appreciate what you bring all kind of different investors' feedback to you, each of you. For the just little bit generalize the early stage companies, we want to ensure that you actually know what kind of problem you want to really serve. You may think this is a big problem, maybe someone really don't care that kind of problem. So that's the one thing, who really care about this problem? What kind of value you can bring to the world? The second, your solution. Your solution, you may think this is amazing, serve this most difficult problem in the world, but oftentimes I hear this solution really serve the maybe 10% of the problem. You want to spend your time, energy, and then all the monetary resources to serve nobody really care. That's really a heartbreaking thing for me. So I want to always ensure that all these stage founders, please think about what kind of solution you can bring to this problem, how much percentage you can achieve to serve this problem. And then finally, we talk about TAM, SAM, SOM. TAM is not really meaningful to any investor, but what we see, especially for the early stage, is the growth potential. So based on TEM, we say, we can just gauge. It's kind of more like back-end envelope calculation. You may be able to make us at least 20% growth in 5 years. We actually calculated. So even though you think this is not necessary, doesn't make any sense, please ensure that you know what kind of market you're talking about. Through that, we actually read about your business acumen. So this is exercise. I know a lot of you are scientists and engineers, so we actually purposely check your business acumen. So I highly encourage you to pay attention to this kind of aspect.
Well, I think we've run over time, but any last closing thoughts from ladies on the panel? All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Ladies, would you like to go for a little round of Q&A from the audience?
Q&A.
Yeah, we still have a little time left, like 5 minutes. Does anybody have any questions? Let's go for a little bit of a Q&A session. It was a very, very insightful discussion. Does anybody has any follow-up questions? Let's go. Don't be shy. Okay, let me ask you a question then. Since we have an amazing female representation, I know it's a bit of a broad question, but what do you perceive as a main challenge as a woman being in this industry on both sides, as an entrepreneur, as an investor? What do you see as the main challenge that we need to tackle within this community?
I think I could speak first. The statistics show that 3% females get funded. And so the main challenge is to get the attention very quickly and what you're doing very quickly and have a level of seriousness that you've done this and you've done this before. You're going to sell a company again. So I think that that's been a very important challenge.
Thank you. Anyone else's take on this?
I want to add to Margaret's statement here about 3% of women getting funding. The statistics also show that women-led startups actually do better in the long run in terms of making money for investors and exits, because they don't take as many wild risks as male entrepreneurs. So all the more reason to think about funding a female entrepreneur.
Yeah, I just want to add to the Sawana. There's a research recently, even the female-led venture capital outperform the traditional venture fund 40%. So we believe the female founders, female investors have capability and ability to be successful. But why we have only 20% female-led company got funded? I thought about it a lot. As an investor who supports female founders, this is really very sad to hear that. We need to think about what kind of impression we gave to the society and industry, why we are not receiving the proper appreciation and then proper credibility in the society, in this kind of industry. It doesn't mean because we don't have enough the expertise or experience. I guess it's more about the credibility. And venture basically is built white male men. It is the industry set up by these people. So they already have achieved a lot of success, and it's natural to judge or measure everything on their standpoint. So as always, we always fight for it, and we always ensure that we are eligible. And I see a lot of female executives in the Fortune 200 companies now. And we, as you see, we see a lot of female managing directors and fund partners in the investor. We are changing. We are actually changing the industry. We just need to ensure that we can lead, we can help other next generation female to be successful.
Well, I frankly think this question shouldn't exist, to be honest. I have been working with all men management teams, and that has never been an issue. I work with brilliant women, and that is wonderful, and I enjoy that a lot. So I think we kind of also just have to acknowledge that, you know, we all need to work on this, fine, but I think we shouldn't make it such a topic. And in the end, we have to deliver. Men have to deliver. Women have to deliver. And I think we are on a very good way, as we can say. And I think we should talk more about what we deliver than about being a woman or a man.
You know, I have to agree, because I can tell you, as a banker, I have different challenges, but there have been so many supportive men that have helped me get to where I am. So we just have to start moving away from this female versus male thing, and we just have to move forward. And I highly encourage this panel here to be, you know, very confident in your abilities. I mean, it's not easy to grow these companies and take them to where you've been. And I think investors are going to pick up on this. We are making roadways in so many ways. I mean, Erica Rogers took Silk Road public. That never happened in MedTech many, many years ago. So things are happening, and we just have to move away from this dichotomy and this line and this, you know, soft line in the sand that they can do it, why can't we?
It's still very interesting how everyone's answer started with data. That just made me reflect for a minute. Like, the answer would have been very different if you asked the men the question. But I'm with you. I think this is the great time to be a woman. I'm not saying the challenges are not there, because it's, you know, the challenges are still there, and it's very subtle. You can see it every day. But I think we're all moving past it. Men are moving past their challenges as well. They're still there, but it's a great time to be a woman.
Thank you. Yes, well, I'm a managing director myself in a tech industry. You know, I run events for fintech, crypto, AI, and blockchain. And this has been quite a journey. And one of our superstars and ambassadors, Dr. Sarah Al-Madani out of Dubai. She's a very well-known entrepreneur there. And she always says, female founders don't need to be empowered. They are powerful enough by themselves. They just need to be supported. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for your words. Thank you for sharing your expertise and experience. And here's to supporting each other. Thank you. Let's give our ladies a round of applause. Thank you.